Here to talk to us about the rejection of the tentative agreement is National Business Agent for Region 3 of the National Association of Letter Carriers, Mike Caref. Also a president or a candidate for president in the 2026 elections of the NALC. I will note for the record, the Valley Labor Report is not endorsing any candidate, and over the course of the campaign, any candidate is welcome to come on the show at one point or another, but we are not talking about the campaign. At this time, we are simply talking about the contract rejection. Mike Caref, welcome to the program, Mike. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, good afternoon again.
Yes. Good afternoon. Great to hear from you. So, what are your initial reactions to the results of the vote?
Man, we're overjoyed. Just because when we first, well, you can go back, to the pandemic, really. We worked through the pandemic. We didn't miss a day of work. It was very scary for letter carriers. There was a lot of talk of hazard pay. Some other workers did get hazard pay. We didn't. We had a collective bargaining agreement. And we just kind of we're out there, we're working. And when the contract expired, well, we started negotiations February 22nd of 2023, almost 2 years ago, on a new contract. And so we get into the end of the contract, which was, 90 days later, May 20th, 2023, and there's no agreement. And, at that point, we had the right to go to arbitration. And mind you, we won the right to go to arbitration. We went out on strike in 1970. When the carriers went on a strike at that time, they changed everything. They changed the law. It went from the U.S. Post Office to the United States Postal Service. We had real collective bargaining, negotiating directly with the employer for a contract. And what the law said is that if we didn't come to terms with the Postal Service, that we had the right to take our case to a neutral arbitrator. Really, it's a tri-party arbitration panel consisting of one person from the NALC, one person from the Postal Service, and then a neutral arbitrator. And we had that right, and the arbitrator would make their determination, or the panel would make their determination based on the comparability standard, comparable in pay and benefits to those in the private sector of the economy of the United States. And it clarified that it would be a career job. And so we had this kind of leverage, and we saw what was going on. That was when UAW was doing a lot, when the Teamsters were doing a lot with the United Parcel Service. And we saw this going on, and it was like, okay, now is our turn. Now is our turn to get rewarded for the work we did through the pandemic and just, the daily grind. So the job had gotten a lot harder over the last few years. We've gone through this period where we're on the street a lot more. We're being harassed a lot more by the supervisors. They have GPS on our scanners now, and they know what we're doing at all times. And they're constantly questioning us about every single minute of every single day. Like I say, we're out on the street for a longer period than we've ever been. The job is very physical, as well as, dealing with the public, being the face of the Postal Service. A lot of little things like our uniform costs have been going up greatly. So we're really looking for this contract to kind of solve this problem, to right size the situation, to make it, so that the job that we once knew, which was a great job, which put us solidly in the middle class, which was a dignified job, a job you could be proud of, a job you pass on to your kids and your kids' kids. That job in service of the American people had just been deteriorating. And we thought that the contract needed to right that. And so at the end of that, at May 20th of 2023, we didn't have agreement with our employer, the United States Postal Service. We didn't go to arbitration. And the president of the union, who oversees the collective bargaining process, was continuing negotiating. And it was secret negotiations. And the Building a Fighting NELC, who you quoted, really came out and said, why do we have these secret negotiations? And they're absolutely right. Why is it not transparent? Why do the members of the union not know what is being negotiated on our behalf? This is our contract. It's our livelihood, But that was not the president's strategy. He said, no, I'm having these negotiations with the Postal Service. And those went on from May of 2023. I mean, the negotiations had started in February, but they were ongoing. We did not go to arbitration, despite the president telling us, hey, we have an arbitrator picked out, a neutral arbitrator. okay, are we going to have hearings? No, we're still talking. We're gonna see if we come up with a deal. And it went all the way until October the 18th of 2024, like 500, 600 days, 20 months of negotiating.
Mm.
And, every carrier is like, okay, well, I didn't, I was a little different, but a lot of carriers had optimism. They're like, if it's taking this damn long, it must be pretty good. We must be getting, whatever. And when we saw the terms, we're like, this is a slap in the face. Not only did it continue the non-career classification of CCAs, city carrier assistants, which has, really decimated the craft. Quality workers don't want the job, and people are leaving the job in droves. It's not really a career job anymore. And the non-career job, it really sucks. I mean, even when you become career, it takes way too long to get to the top of the pay scale, and there's a lot of other issues in there. But, the non-career job is just like a non-starter in today's economy and what we're dealing with as far as what the job has become. And so that there was no change whatsoever in the non-career classification, not even a reduction in the time. So right now the rules are that you can spend no more than 2 years as a non-career CCA, and then they have to convert you. If there's a vacancy in that post office, they'll convert you prior to the 2 years. But with or without a vacancy, it'll be 2 years. And, we won that in the last contract. And so we're looking for some improvement on that. We're looking for some improvement in the pay, which is, in 2012, the last time we had a non-career workforce, which was known as transitional employees, those carriers were starting at $22.15 an hour back then in 2012. So in today's wages, that's like $29, $30 an hour, right, if you adjust for inflation. And the terms of this tentative agreement had CCA still making $20 an hour. And even at the end of the contract, it would be like $21 an hour at the most. And we're like, no, no way. But you don't know what everyone's feeling. And so a lot of the branches, including my branch and a lot of other branches, were very active in mobilizing the membership. There was a lot of rallies. We had a lot of rallies on Columbus Day, the Indigenous Peoples Day in October, all around the country. And we had a lot of motions in local branches to support a no vote, to endorse a no vote, encourage the membership to vote no on the contract. And you think, okay, this is the will of the carriers, but you just don't know. I mean, the president of the NELC spent a lot of our money and resources and time, trying to sell this thing. And his selling point was, this is the best we're going to get from the Postal Service. And, as you see the results finally come in yesterday, it's like the best they can offer is not good enough for us. They're going to have to do better. And if they're not willing to do better, then we're going to have to force this thing in front of a neutral arbitrator to get some better terms.
I would just say, I'll mention this, and this is something that I've thought a lot, but the language about the compensation of the postal workers and letter carriers, as you mentioned, is there's some language about like it should be comparable to pay in the private industry, and that language has always been kind of used to justify like, oh, they make 85% of what they would in the private sector or whatever, but you could also be comparable while being paid more, right? I mean, you could right, theoretically have, a postal service where postal workers and letter carriers make 115% of what they would make at UPS or somewhere else, right? I mean, there's no reason that you should have to make less than you would if you worked in the private sector. And in fact, I think that there's a strong case that it should be higher, for one, because it's the government, and the government should be like an ideal employer. We should be, as a people, as a public, kind of putting out what we want, as like a guide for other people. We should be a high road employer, but also because we as a government have an interest in attracting the best talent. And it's going to be difficult to get the best people for the job if you don't pay as much as other people, right? I mean, has that argument ever been pursued? Like, yes, we should be paid comparable to the private sector, so we should be paid 110% or 115% of what they make at UPS instead of 85%. Has that ever even been like argued?
You know, the arbitration hearings that have taken place. So we started the collective bargaining process in 1970, and I think we went to arbitration about 6 times since then. But there's not like, there's not a live stream or, a
Mm,
transcript, or so I don't know exactly what's been argued. I sat in on the last arbitration that we had. We ended up coming to agreement with the Postal Service, but they had hearings for like a couple, 3 months in late 2020. And then we ended up coming to agreement, I think in December of 2020, and we ratified that contract in 2021. And by the way, we ratified that contract with 96% approval of the contract. So when you
wow.
talk about the effort that it required to move that thing in the direction of the membership voting no and voting no overwhelmingly, there's a sea change out there. There's a sea change that apparently, the president of the NELC is kind of not aware of. But what was once acceptable is no longer acceptable, and so there's a change. But to your point, UPS drivers are making now $45 an hour top. And once they become a driver, which it's hard to start as a driver in their contract. Sometimes you have to start in the warehouse job and part-time
Right.
work and stuff like that. But once you become a driver, it's 4 years till you get to the
Yeah.
$45. We are currently at $36, $37 an hour top. And even with the, raises and stuff like that in the tentative agreement, even we would only get to like $41, $42 an hour in 2026, in November of 2026. And by then, well, in 2027, I guess, the UPS drivers will be at $49 an hour top. And then, of course, you look at benefits, and what we have very good is we have a good leave program, very generous, I would say, or very quality leave program, and we have a quality retirement program. But some of the other stuff is not as good as what the UPS drivers are getting. So, you kind of look at comparability. It doesn't specifically say comparability to a similar job, although it's kind of, you interpret the law and you say, I think that's what they kind of meant. But
Hmm.
it just says comparable to the pay and benefits in the private sector of the United States, the economy of the United States. And so,
Mm,
yeah, you could make a good argument that it should be more because of the requirements of the job. There's legal requirements. Everyone has to pass what they call a NACI background check, because you're handling people's mail. You're
right.
handling sensitive information. We're the face of the federal government in the community at least 6 days a week, every home and business in America. Not to mention the fact that it's a physical job, not to mention the fact that the job has become a lot more dangerous. We're being stuck up at gunpoint. We carry things of value. The keys that
Hmm.
we carry are valuable to some people. The checks and the credit cards and the packages are valuable to people. And we're out there, and we feel like, I mean, that's one thing that's, you talk about the disrespect on the job. The post office has postal police, and they only put the postal police inside to protect the real property of the postal service, and us, the humans that are out there on the street, we get no protection whatsoever. The police don't come out there and protect us, even as a deterrent, even driving around, even anything like that. There's neighborhoods in the city of Chicago where I'm from. Amazon will come drop the packages at the post office because they're not going to go out there and make those deliveries in those
Mm,
neighborhoods. But the
right.
postal service is universal service. We deliver to everyone, everywhere. So there should be a premium associated with that. We saw that during the pandemic. It's like, you're essential. People need their medicines. People need to be able to vote. And so we're going to deliver the ballots. People, even when we deliver the masks, or we could deliver vaccines or whatever, anything that has to get to the people, that's an essential thing that's necessary. You have a network of people, and the postal service as a whole is a network, but we, the nation's letter carriers, are the ones that are out there performing that job. And so to make the argument that there should be a premium associated with that shouldn't be a hard argument to make at all. But this tentative agreement, I mean, there was so much fuzzy math going on, and playing with the numbers and making it seem like it was better than what it was, and it was like, it just was subpar. It was subpar.
So, it seems like from the statement that I read from the NALC and Brian Renfro that things are going to be moving pretty quickly now. He said that negotiations will begin within 5 calendar days of the results being announced, and negotiations will conclude no more than 15 calendar days from when the negotiations begin. So walk us through exactly what that means, what are the next steps, and what are the timelines for the union, and then we'll talk after that answer about the next steps for letter carriers and how letter carriers can build support for a strong contract.
Yeah, so this thing is there's a 15-day limit in the Constitution of the NELC. So basically, we informed the Postal Service the members rejected this tentative agreement that we had with you, and therefore we want to reopen negotiations. And the Postal Service agreed. They said, okay, we'll reopen negotiations. And the Constitution caps that at 15 days. And then after that, you could call for a work stoppage, but the president of the NLC is not going to do that. I'm not even saying that would be that would be advantageous. But what we're going to do after that is go to the arbitration process. We're not sure what that time frame is going to look like. One of the things is obviously we're going to get raises, and those raises are going to go back to the expiration of the contract. So we're currently working under the terms of the old contract that expired May 20th, 2023. So any raises we get in this new contract, they're going to be retroactive to that time, which means that back pay is going to be associated with the new contract. Whenever they implement the new terms, they're going to owe us money. One of the problems is we have people that have quit the job, and people that have retired, and so doing that back pay is going to be complicated. But also, we feel like we're entitled to interest on the back pay because the post office has been holding on to our money for these last 2 years, and interest rates are pretty high nowadays. So we have an interest in moving this thing along pretty quickly, but the Postal Service has the opposite interest. They have an interest in just kind of delaying the thing further. So we really are monitoring that situation and really encouraging our president, who heads up the negotiating process, to move this thing along as quickly as possible. Let's get this in front of an arbitrator. We're not very optimistic that the Postal Service, we negotiated with them for 600 days. Do you really think an additional 15 days is going to, substantially get us a higher offer or a better deal or something that would be acceptable to us? But maybe it will. The president has indicated he's going to give a good faith effort, and that's the right move. That's absolutely what we should be doing. But 15 days is plenty. We'll see what they come up with. If it's something that we feel is worthy of, going back to the membership for another vote, that's a possibility. We could get a new offer from the Postal Service and come back to the membership and say, okay, how about this as a tentative agreement? And we would vote again. Hopefully the vote won't take that long. The voting process took forever. That's another problem we have is the mail standards are deteriorating. And it took forever for people to get their ballots and return them in a mail ballot election. And we're the damn National Association of Letter Carriers. So, that's something that we really have to address. But that's something that everyone in America is dealing with. The slowing down of the mail isn't on purpose, that kind of thing. So that's really the next frontier after we secure a solid contract. The next thing is going to be dealing with the inefficiencies in the Postal Service and the gross mismanagement of the Postal Service. But we'll get to that, kind of next. Right now, we got to make sure that we have a contract where people are going to actually want this job. And so we think that's going to be through arbitration. And we're going to try to do it as fast as possible. But there's no guarantee. The parties at one time, like a year ago, had agreed to a neutral arbitrator. So I was saying the panel is one person from the NELC, one from the Postal Service, and then you have a neutral arbitrator. So we had agreed that Dennis Nolan would be the neutral arbitrator, but I don't know where that's at now. Is Dennis Nolan still going to be the neutral arbitrator? If so, does he have dates available? When are these hearings going to start? Are these hearings going to be accessible to the membership of the union? It's our contract. So there's still a lot of questions about this whole process. But the first thing is the 15 days, and then the president has indicated that we will reconvene as an executive council. I'm on the executive council of the NELC. There's 28 of us around the country that are on the executive council, and he's told us that we're going to reconvene after the 15 days to figure out our next steps from there.
You're not going to be reconvening before the 15 days to inform bargaining strategy for these 15 days?
No, You know, the
Okay.
Constitution of the NELC puts all the power in the hands of the president to come up with the bargaining strategy, and he relies on staff and people that he thinks are most qualified to help him out in that process. And you know, that's up to us to say when we have our elections every 4 years, whether we trust that person or if we want to go in a different direction. So he's our president right now, and he's going to go forth with the process and the procedures that he feels are best for the union.